If you're planning your next trip to Europe, there are so many things that you have to take into account before you go there. First of all, there are 45 different countries in Europe, and each of them has their own language, culture, traditions, food, many things. Thanks to that, each country will provide a different experience. Although English is commonly spoken in most of those countries, don't be surprised if locals are not able to understand or speak English. So, without further ado, let me share some tips before your next trip to Europe. Tip number 1. Know about the currency of each country. Most countries in Europe have the euro as their currency, but that's not the case in all of them. For example, some countries such as Croatia, Poland, Hungary, or Sweden use their local currency. You may have to take this into account if you're planning on visiting some of those countries, and although you may be able to use your credit card in most of them, it's always good to have some cash with you in case anything happens. Tip number 2. Use public transportation. Unlike some other places, public transportation in Europe is cheap and reliable. In most capitals and big cities, buses might even be available 24 hours a day. Also, before using public transportation, please check because in each country it's going to be different. Sometimes it's going to be better if you buy a day pass, or maybe it's easier if you buy a prepaid card such as similar to Suica or Pasmo. And also don't forget to check if you can pay with cash or if you can only pay with credit card. It's different in each country, so please check before going there. Tip number 3. Consider visiting many countries in Europe. Traveling within Europe might be cheaper than you think. If you're lucky, you may find plane tickets for less than 700 yen, about 5 euro. Although that's not the usual price, it's possible to find those offers. The average price for a plane ticket is about 50 euros, but it's possible to find them cheaper. Taking the train might be an affordable option, especially if you are in Eastern Europe. But if you are in the western part of Europe, you might find it a little bit expensive. Anyways, buses are always a cheap option to consider as well, although they might be not as comfortable as taking the plane or the train. In any case, tickets are usually cheaper the earlier you buy them, so you can make the most of those discounts if you plan your trip in advance. Tip number 4. Beware of prices. Even though the euro is the currency in most countries, the prices might be quite different from one to another. So don't be surprised if the same item costs like 9 times more in a northern country. For instance, a 500 milliliter beer might cost you about 10 euros in Norway, 5 euros in Italy, and just 1 euro in Hungary. So if you want to make the most of your money, consider visiting those cheap countries. You might be also surprised by how much they also have to offer. Tip number 5. Don't be shocked if someone randomly talks to you in the street. It might not be the case in all countries, but especially in southern countries, random people may talk to you in the street, but maybe they just want to say hello or good morning, just make some small talk. But you don't have to worry because probably they just don't want anything from you. People tend to be friendly with others in the street, and especially if it's a local neighborhood. You might be surprised as well if you go to restaurants, shops, or supermarkets and you see employees talking to each other. This might be considered quite rude in Japan, but in Europe, it's not. Tip number 6. Beware of pickpockets. Whenever you ride the metro, you will hear that voice saying, "Beware of pickpockets." I don't really need to explain why, but just be careful with your belongings when you ride public transportation. Pickpockets usually target tourists because they think they are an easier victim, or because they may think that they won't report it to the police. Despite that, most countries in Europe are quite safe and you don't have to worry because pickpockets will avoid violence. So even if you get robbed, probably you won't even notice. Tip number 7. Consider coming back. Okay, so in general, as you can see, there are so many countries in Europe that it's technically impossible to visit them all. And that's why you should consider coming back. Sometimes it might be difficult to accept that you can try all the food, you cannot see all the places you wanted to, but it's okay, you have an excuse to come back. Most tourists usually visit capital cities because it's where you can find all the main attractions, but Europeans sometimes prefer to go to smaller towns because they feel like they are more unique and special. So, these are some of the things you should consider before your first trip to Europe. But overall, don't forget to enjoy yourself, try the local food, take tons of pictures, and just have fun. Finally, I'd like to ask you a question. Have you ever visited Europe? Can you tell me about it in the comments? Thank you for watching!